Civilian vessel, you are in a restricted emergency zone. Identify yourself immediately. Are you deaf, old man? The voice, amplified by a bullhorn, was sharp and serrated, cutting through the gentle lapping of waves against the hull of a small, battered fishing boat named Serenity. On board, an old man named Jedediah Croft didn't even flinch. His back, slightly stooped from decades of hard living, remained turned to the source of the noise, a gleaming white Coast Guard cutter, the USCGC Vigilant, that had sliced through the morning mist like a predator. His hands, gnarled and scarred like ancient driftwood, continued their slow, methodical work, coiling a fishing line with a practiced economy of motion that was almost hypnotic. He wore faded denim overalls over a flannel shirt worn thin at the elbows, and a simple, sweat-stained ball cap was pulled low over his brow. To the young officer watching from the cutter's bridge, he looked like a relic, a stubborn old fool who was either ignoring a federal order or was too senile to comprehend it. The disrespect was a physical thing, a wave of arrogant certainty rolling off the larger vessel and crashing against the quiet dignity of the smaller one. Jedediah finished coiling the line, placing it deliberately in a weathered wooden box. Only then did he turn, his movements unhurried, and look toward the cutter. His face was a road map of a long life, etched with deep lines around eyes the color of a faded sky. He raised a hand, not in surrender or panic, but in a simple, placid acknowledgement, as if someone had merely called his name from across a quiet street. On the bridge of the Vigilant, Lieutenant Kalen scoffed, his perfectly pressed uniform seeming to tighten with indignation. "He's waving at us," he muttered to his second-in-command. "Thinks this is a parade." Kalen was young, sharp, a product of the academy, and he saw the world in terms of regulations, authority, and appearances. The old man in the floating wreck below him offended all three. "Right, that's it. Master Chief, stay on the bridge. I'm taking a boarding party over. We'll escort this gentleman and his rust bucket out of our operational area and slap him with a fine big enough to make him remember it." From the back of the bridge, Master Chief Petty Officer Hayes watched through a pair of powerful binoculars, a knot of unease tightening in his gut. He'd been in the service for 30 years, and his instincts were honed to a razor's edge. Something was wrong with this picture. It wasn't the old man's defiance, it was the quality of his calm. It wasn't ignorance, it was control. Hayes zoomed in, focusing on the old man's stance. He stood with his feet planted slightly apart, his center of gravity low, unconsciously balancing against the gentle roll of his boat. It wasn't the posture of a lifelong fisherman. It was the braced, rooted stance of a man who had spent countless hours on the decks of military vessels in far rougher seas. The way he moved, the lack of any wasted motion, spoke of a deep, ingrained discipline that no amount of age could erase. Lieutenant Kalen and two junior seamen boarded the Serenity with a clatter of boots and equipment that sounded obscene in the morning stillness. The young lieutenant's shoes were polished to a mirror shine, a stark contrast to the peeling paint and salt-stained wood of Jedediah's deck. "Sir?" Kalen began, his voice dripping with condescension. "I don't know if you're aware, but this is a restricted military zone. There is a critical naval situation underway. Your presence here is unauthorized and, frankly, irresponsible." Jedediah just looked at him, his pale eyes giving nothing away. He didn't seem intimidated or impressed. He seemed observant. He glanced at the sidearms on the seamen's hips, at the cutter looming behind them, at the sky, his gaze lingering for a moment as if checking the weather or something more. From the bridge, Master Chief Hayes saw the motion, and his unease sharpened into genuine alarm. The old man wasn't just looking, he was assessing, categorizing, prioritizing. He was scanning for threats and evaluating assets. As Jedediah reached down to secure a loose cleat, the sleeve of his flannel shirt rode up his forearm. For a split second, Hayes's binoculars caught it, a faint, bluish-gray marking on the weathered skin of his wrist. It was almost completely faded, a ghost of an image, but Hayes's heart hammered against his ribs. It looked like a stylized phantom or a ghost, superimposed over a submarine's propeller. It was an image he'd only ever heard about in hushed, almost mythical stories told by old Cold War divers, the unofficial insignia of a unit that officially never existed. "Do you have any idea the trouble you're in?" Kalen continued, his voice rising as the old man's silence grated on his authority. "We have a United States nuclear submarine, the USS Nebraska, experiencing a catastrophic systems failure on the seabed directly below us. This is a matter of national security." He gestured expansively, as if revealing a grand secret to a simpleton. "We are clearing a 5-mile radius for a deep-sea rescue and recovery operation. Now, I will give you one final chance to start your engine and vacate this area, or I will have my men tow this thing to port, where it will be impounded." The threat hung in the air, heavy and ridiculous. Jedediah's gaze shifted from Kalen to the water, a flicker of something unreadable in his eyes. It wasn't fear, it was a deep, profound understanding. He knew exactly what was down there. On the bridge of the Vigilant, a secure channel crackled to life, the voice on the other end urgent and strained. It was Fleet Command. "Vigilant, this is Subland. We have a critical update on the Nebraska. Her primary battery is failing, and life support is on a 60-minute countdown. The exterior manual override for the emergency ballast valve is jammed. Our ROVs can't get the torque, and the pressure is beyond the safe limits for our current dive teams. We can't reach her." A pause, then the voice came back, tight with desperation. "Listen closely. We have a Hail Mary. High-value asset protocol has been activated. We have a last known residence ping for an asset codenamed Steel Phantom in your vicinity. I need you to confirm if there is any sign of him. I repeat, is there any sign of Steel Phantom?" Master Chief Hayes felt the blood drain from his face. Steel Phantom. It wasn't just a story, it was real. The name was a legend in the special operations and deep-sea warfare communities, a ghost who operated during the darkest days of the Cold War. A man who could supposedly work at crushing depths, performing miracles of engineering and salvage with his bare hands on disabled spy subs and sunken assets, all while remaining completely off the books. A man who could breathe a specialized gas mixture that would kill anyone else. A man whose body was conditioned to withstand pressures that would turn a normal human to jelly. He was a myth, a boogeyman the Russians whispered about. A hero the admirals kept locked in their most secret files. Hayes frantically raised his binoculars again, his hands shaking slightly. He focused on the old man's wrist, willing the image to become clear. And it did. The faded tattoo was unmistakable. A ghost over a screw. He grabbed the ship's comms, his voice tight and urgent, overriding Kalen's channel. "Lieutenant Kalen, this is Master Chief Hayes. Acknowledge immediately." Kalen, mid-sentence and another threat to the old man, spun around in irritation. "What is it, Master Chief? I'm busy here." Hayes's voice was ice. "Sir, you will stand down. Right now. You will cease all communication with that civilian. You will return to the Vigilant. That is a direct advisement from the senior enlisted on this vessel. Do you understand me, Lieutenant?" Kalen was flabbergasted by the insubordination. "Master Chief, have you lost your mind? I have this situation under—" His words were swallowed by a sudden, deafening roar from above. A Navy MH-60 Seahawk helicopter, gunmetal gray and bristling with antennas, blasted out of the low clouds, its powerful downdraft churning the sea into a white froth. It didn't circle. It descended with brutal efficiency, hovering 50 feet above the deck of the Vigilant. The side door was open, and a figure in a flight suit was already preparing to rappel down. The sheer speed and aggression of the helicopter's arrival screamed of an emergency far beyond a stubborn fisherman. It was the kind of entrance reserved for the highest echelons of command in the most dire of circumstances. The figure landed on the deck with a practiced thud, immediately disconnecting from the rope. He pulled off his helmet, revealing the stern, authoritative face, and the two silver stars on the collar of Rear Admiral Jennings, the commander of the entire Atlantic submarine fleet. Kalin snapped to attention, his mind reeling. "Admiral, sir. Lieutenant Kalin, commanding officer, USCGC Vigilant. I was not aware of your arrival." Jennings didn't even look at him. His eyes, burning with intensity, were locked on the small fishing boat below. He strode to the railing, his gaze sweeping past the humiliated lieutenant as if he were a piece of deck equipment. He looked at Master Chief Hayes, who was now standing ramrod straight by the bridge door. "Master Chief?" the Admiral barked. "Is that him?" Hayes swallowed hard, his voice barely a whisper. "The marker is consistent with the files, Admiral." "I believe so, sir." The Admiral nodded once, a grim finality in the motion. He took a deep breath, and his voice, honed by years of commanding men in the face of death, boomed across the water, carrying with its own raw power, no bullhorn needed. It was a voice that expected to be obeyed by fleets and nations. "Jedediah Croft?" Down on the Serenity, the old man looked up. The wind from the helicopter's rotors whipped at his thin flannel shirt and tugged at his cap, but he seemed as unmovable as a mountain. For the first time, a flicker of something other than placid calm crossed his face. It wasn't surprise. It was resignation. He gave a slow, deliberate nod. In that moment, Rear Admiral Jennings did something that shattered Lieutenant Kalin's entire understanding of the chain of command. He squared his shoulders, brought his heels together with an audible click, and raised his hand to his brow in the sharpest, most impeccably correct salute Kalin had ever witnessed. It was a salute of profound, almost reverent respect. A salute a junior officer gives a decorated senior, a salute a warrior gives a legend. It was not a salute an admiral gives to an old man in a fishing boat. "Sir," Admiral Jennings called out, his voice cracking with the strain of the situation. "The call has gone out. The Nebraska is on the bottom, and her crew is dying. We need the Steel Phantom." The universe tilted for Lieutenant Kalin. The words Steel Phantom echoed the desperate call from Fleet Command, and they collided with the impossible image of the two-star admiral saluting the relic he had just been threatening. The old man, the stubborn, deaf old man, he wasn't in the way, he was the only way. Kalin felt a wave of nausea and shame so profound it almost buckled his knees. Every condescending word he had spoken, every dismissive gesture replayed in his mind, now painted with the horrifying colors of his own ignorance. He had been sneering at a living monument, a man whose service was so critical, so far above his own pay grade, that his very existence was a national secret. Down below, Jedediah sighed, a long, weary sound that seemed to carry the weight of 100 forgotten missions. He looked from the Admiral to his simple fishing rod as if mourning the loss of a peaceful morning. Then his voice, gravelly and quiet, carried across the water, cutting through the helicopter's roar with an authority all its own. "What's the problem, Admiral?" The Admiral quickly relayed the technical details. The jammed valve, the specific series of counterturns and pressure applications needed, the depth that was killing their equipment. Jedediah listened, his head cocked slightly, processing the information not as a layman, but as an expert diagnosing a familiar illness. "Hydrogen embrittlement on the valve stem?" he asked, and the Admiral just nodded grimly. "Figured," Jedediah said. "That alloy always was brittle in the cold. I'll need my old kit, and a quiet ride down. This thing," he patted the side of the Serenity, "is good for cod, not for that kind of depth." Within minutes, the entire dynamic of the scene had inverted. Jedediah Croft was brought aboard the Vigilant, not as a prisoner, but as a king. The crew, who had earlier watched Kalen's arrogant display, now parted before the old man with a mixture of awe and fear. Master Chief Hayes met him at the gangway. "It's an honor, sir," Hayes said, his voice thick with emotion. Jedediah just gave him a small, tired smile. "No, sir, necessary, Master Chief. The name's Jed." A second helicopter was already inbound, carrying a single, heavy-duty container. Inside was the old kit. It was a specialized closed-circuit rebreather system that looked both antiquated and impossibly advanced, along with a set of tools that looked like they belonged in a surgeon's operating theater. As Jedediah began to suit up, with the help of a specialized team that had arrived with the Admiral, the transformation was breathtaking. The slightly stooped fisherman straightened, his posture aligning into one of immense power and purpose. The slow, methodical movements became precise, efficient, and lethal. Every buckle he fastened, every gauge he checked, was done with an innate familiarity that was both terrifying and beautiful to watch. The worn, gnarled hands became the instruments of a master craftsman preparing for his life's work. His faded blue eyes, once placid, now burned with a cold, focused fire. He was no longer an old man. He was a weapon. Fully suited, looking like a figure from a deep-sea nightmare, Jedediah Croft walked toward the dive platform. He moved past Lieutenant Kalen, who stood frozen in place, his face pale with shame. Jedediah stopped, turning to face the young officer who had so thoroughly disrespected him just 30 minutes earlier. Kalen flinched, expecting a tirade, a dressing down that he so richly deserved. But Jedediah didn't raise his voice. He reached out a gloved hand and placed it gently on Kalen's shoulder. The gesture was not accusatory. It was paternal. "Son?" Jedediah's voice, muffled slightly by the helmet's comms, was calm and devoid of malice. "Remember this day. The uniform doesn't make the man. The man makes the uniform. It's what you do when no one is looking, when there are no medals to be won. That defines your service. Learn from it." Kalen could only nod, tears welling in his eyes. He finally understood that he hadn't just insulted a man. He had insulted the very ideal of humble, silent service that his own uniform was supposed to represent. Jedediah gave his shoulder a final firm squeeze and then turned away. He walked to the edge of the deck, gave a final nod to the Admiral, and stepped off into the cold, dark Atlantic. He disappeared beneath the waves without a splash, a phantom returning to his realm of crushing pressure and absolute silence, leaving a humbled young officer and a reverent crew to contemplate the true nature of heroism.